The White Pill is available now at whitepillbook.com. This episode is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very fun and exciting episode. I've been meaning for a long time to do this, and now we finally have a reason to after my recent Joe Rogan appearance. With me is one of my dear friends that I've made here in Austin and one of my favorite people, Natalie Sideserf of Sideserf Cake Studio. You should follow her on YouTube and Instagram, everywhere else, because her whole shtick, besides being adorable, is making cakes that look really realistic. And my producer, Brett, who before we started recording, he asked me, he goes, is this the, and you made, most importantly, the Lex Fridman cake that we unveiled on Rogan, whose face is now currently in my kitchen under a cake stand in perpetuity. My producer says, is this the Natalie Sideserf from American Idol? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, yes, and it's on your Wikipedia. So I thought I'd ask you about it right now.
Well, I have made a cake that was very quickly featured on American Idol.
Oh.
But I was not on American Idol. This was probably 9 years ago or something.
2013,
like that.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago, yeah. And I actually got to make a cake for Keith Urban. That's right. Keith Urban, he had a record, it was kicking butt, and he was like, we want a cake for to celebrate that he sold all these records. It's amazing. And so I got to go make him a cake, and that was actually cool because that was the first time I ever saw TV stuff. I was watching behind the scenes, and I was watching the people come out screaming I got the ticket or whatever. I didn't watch the show, but you get what I mean.
Round, they get something, a pass. It's a pass, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something, and it means they move on. And so it was really cool to see all that for the first time. But yeah, I made a cake for him, and I saw Jennifer Lopez. I didn't really meet her, but I saw her. She was a judge at the time. She was glowing.
Does she have that kind of crazy star quality in person?
No, that was the person that I've seen. I've never seen anybody like that. The way that she walked in a room and everybody was I'm that has to be so awkward for her. But yeah, everybody stares at her, and she really is. She's gorgeous. So it was kind of neat. I was also gawking, but everybody else was really nice and down to earth. And Keith Urban was really nice and stuff.
So there's a lot I want to talk to you about. First of all, that meme about everything is cake. You guys started that, but it started with there's a funny story about your wedding cakes. And it's funny because what you and Dave, your husband, who's your partnering. Oh, by the way, you had a show called Texas Cake House, which people can watch also. You guys are partners in crime in every sense. Can you tell that story? And we're gonna, by the way, Dave will send us some of these graphics so we can put them up during the episode so people can see what we're talking about. Can you tell the thing that's interesting about your wedding cake story is not only what the wedding cakes themselves were, but how the media lied about what happened. Can you tell people that story? Because I think it's really, really sweet. And by the way, what it was really interesting about that story is it takes place in what is now the comedy club that Joe Rogan just opened up. So everything came full circle.
Yes. And I also can't wait to go check out Joe Rogan's comedy club. Was it
you're
Comedy Mothership?
Oh, no. After that Rogan disaster, he thinks you're a witch. He's like, I don't want that bad juju near my comedy club.
I better be allowed in there. I got married in that building. I want to see what it looks like now.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Is it gorgeous?
I listen, opening night, I was backstage. It was me, Tim Dillon, Ron White, Tony Hinchcliffe, David Lucas, Roseanne, and some people, I think Jim Florentine, Rogan, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I do not belong in this room. I was a complete fraud. And Roseanne is there, and she's like, yeah, when you get to be my age, you either have diarrhea or nothing comes out. And I was on Tucker Carlson, and my son said, Mom, you were never more personable. And she goes, and I said, yeah, because I shit my pants. And I'm
Oh my
sitting here
God.
and I'm like, I am so glad I live in Austin
So
that
she's just as like
she's even
bold.
more she's even more Roseanne in person. Plus,
Oh, that's so good. I'm so happy to hear that,
she's
actually.
5'4" and she's actually adorable. Like, she's little and
Yeah.
petite, and she's, like, 70 and, like, so cute. And someone had this tweet where they said, "If I went back to the '90s and told people that there will come a day when Roseanne Barr is hotter than Madonna, no one would believe me." But it's
That's great.
clearly the case. She's
Oh, that is so
absolutely
true.
adorable.
I agree, and she, like, I think she, like, lost weight and everything, and she looks so good. She's really, really cute. But I've
Eh,
always really liked Roseanne. Like, I loved the idea of, like, that, like,
well, I
middle
assume that
class humor and
backdrop is a reference to it looks literally like the set on the show.
I know it does. I'm in the kitchen where I
Yeah, where you
belong
belong. Wait, so
because I make cakes, right? That's why.
you decorate no, Natalie, you decorate cakes. Can you tell the
No,
story?
I organize cakes.
Can you tell the wedding cake story? Because I love this story.
Okay, okay.
Wait, no, you know, before
So
we get to that, in all seriousness, you have an art degree, and you
mhm,
basically I don't wanna, speak too broadly. I don't wanna say you, like, invented a new art form, but you certainly innovated application of art techniques to a medium that hadn't been developed before, right? So how did that even get into
yeah.
your head? Because that's something that, like, not many people get to be original. That's something I really admire in a person.
Yeah, y it's true. There were a lot of things that I had done with cake that, like, really were innovative. So, like, basically when I started, the very first time I made a cake, it was 2011, and there were all those cake shows, right? Like, you had Cake Boss and Ace of Cakes, and those were popular at the time. But, like, what they were making on those shows were, like, really big, and they moved, and they were, logos or cartoony. And my background in art through college and high school was always realism. Like I studied hyperrealism. I was super interested in, especially hyperrealism. Like Evan Penny had a show. Who he's an artist who does these really large scale hyperrealistic sculptures, not out of cake, but also Ron Muick is another one that does that. That I was really into at the time. So my friend, it's 2011. My friend was like, "Hey, they have these
Wait,
cake
I got
shows."
to interrupt because this is really germane. It drives me crazy when people think of modern art and they just think of Jackson Pollock. There's so many
Mm,
creative, amazing people making things happen, and it's not all like what people would call degenerate or stupid. Just like I don't even know those names, but go to like an art
mhm.
gallery or like to an art museum, you think it's all garbage. There's so much quality stuff out there that really moves you, and I'm sure those two people you mentioned are great examples of this.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it was the kind of like I actually saw their art in person, and when I saw it in the show, I was just like I was into them when I saw the photos online, but when I saw it in person, I was just like
Yeah,
blown away. I was like, this is so like you can see every little. Basically, they're these large scale like humans, and they're hyper realistic, and you get to go. It's like special effects. It's a mix
yeah,
of special effects with art, fine art, and you can go in and see like every little hair punched and like and like it's just like so impressive in person.
yeah.
So I really gravitated towards that. And like, so basically, after I graduated college and I studied that kind of art, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, they have these cake TV shows. They make all these insane sculpted cakes. I know you know how to sculpt. So, like, why don't you give it a try?" So I did. And I made a cake for a friend's birthday. It was of a cow skull and no clue what I was doing. And like, this again was oh, no, sorry, it wasn't 2011, it was probably, like, 2009 or 10, I'm getting my dates wrong, but anyway, it was a long time ago, and, like, basically, there was not a lot of information on how to, like, make cakes
But that
at
seems
that
like it'd be
time.
really hard because the skull has so many hollows in it. Like, how do you navigate that without it structurally collapsing?
Well, that was the thing, I had no idea what I was
Yeah.
doing.
Okay.
So, I kinda treated it like I would any other art media, right? Like, when I was in school, I was working with wire, I was sculpting with plaster, clay, like, all these different materials that are more typical, more common in art, and I was like, "Well, I'm just gonna treat cake like that." So, I made the cow skull, and, there were so many things I did wrong because I just didn't know the basics of, like,
Yeah.
making cake. I didn't even bake a cake prior to this. I was just we got me and my friend got like this boxed cake mix and we just gave it a go. But yeah, so I tried that out and I was like in love. Like the actual cake ended up being very cartoony and cute. It was my first try. I didn't know what I was doing, but it did look like a cow skull and everybody loved it at the party. And I was like, you know what? I was like, there is definitely more that can be done with this, like in terms of it being realistic. Like I gave it a go. It was cartoony. It was meant to be cartoony, but I just knew that there was like way more to it. And I felt like there were so many different materials that I could try out, like edible stuff. So that's what I did. My very first cake that went viral was a cake that I made for a cake show right when I moved to Austin. And this was 2012. I know that one. So it's 2012. And I made a cake of Willie Nelson, like a bust cake. So I made a bust because, you know, it's art. Like you make busts, you do still lifes. Like I was like, this is very like common for me. It's comfortable. So I made a bust of Willie Nelson. And then my brother who lives in Tokyo, I sent him a picture of it. And he used Reddit at the time. He didn't have a big account by any means, but he just kind of like used it once in a while. And he put it up on Reddit. And then the next day, which was the day of the competition, people started like calling me and congratulating me. And I was like, what are you doing? Apparently it was number one on the front page of Reddit in 2013. It was a big deal. 2012.
It's okay. This isn't a deposition. We're talking about cakes. We're not talking about murders.
I just want to get the dates right. 2012. But I was just like, whoa, like, holy, like cow. Like I was so surprised how many people like were excited about it. And it was because nobody was doing anything like this.
Right.
It was mostly cartoony. As far as I knew, like when I went to make that cake, I started doing my research because I always do. And I was looking up like realistic cakes of humans, and everything that I was reading and people that I was actually talking to in person that were like cake people, they're like, you can't make realistic humans out of cake. And I was like, well, why not? Why not try?
Maybe you can't.
Right. I was like, well, like, let's give it a go at least. Yeah. And I did it for a cake competition. So if I messed it up, who cares? There's no customer. Right. So I made that cake. And since it was number one on the front page, like then all this like media started picking it up.
But hold on. But what did you figure out to do that other people previous to you were unable to figure out? Like there must have been certain puzzle pieces that you actually put together.
That's a good question, because the thing is, like, I had an art background and a lot of people who are decorating cakes have pastry backgrounds.
Okay. Yeah.
And when it's pastry, there are a lot of rules, and they like drill, like the rules are very important. And I didn't have that background. So I didn't have that, like, you know, that same mentality about like approaching the cake in this certain way. Cause you know, it's like French pastry. Everything's about measuring and making sure that everything is exact. And I just didn't have that. So I just went in and tried things that they told me, like people were saying, like, you can't, one of the examples is I used modeling chocolate for the very first time when I made that cake, and I covered the cake in modeling chocolate. And a bunch of people told me you can't do that. Well, I found a way, you know, and then they were like, well, then you can't paint it because modeling chocolate has an oil base, right? And then when you use food color, it's water based. And I was like, okay, oil and water don't like each other. And they were right to an extent, because like when I paint, it would start to bead up and it wasn't really painting properly. But I found that if I kept working with it, eventually the water would evaporate and then it would work. And that's how I made the Willie Nelson cake. So it was kind of like I was able to just like ignore everything. I was really using my art background, like the idea of experimenting and just trying things versus like following the rules. So I think that's really what helped me, was that I had an art background that was more experimental versus like the very strict rules of French pastry.
Well, I also like that you had this "you can't tell me what to do" attitude, which is like very American. Like it's very like, you know what, you can't do this. It's like, well, watch me.
Right. I was like, a lot of people just say, you know, oh, okay. And now I know.
Right, yeah.
It's like, I was like, well, I want it to work, so I am going to try my best and I'm going to figure something out. If this doesn't work, there's another way and another way. And, you know, like there's so many different things that haven't been done with cake that I was like, let me just keep trying until I figure it out.
Well, what were you going to do with your degree if you didn't go into this trajectory?
For a minute, I wanted to do photography until I realized I am really bad at figuring out how to use a camera.
Or a mic.
Yeah, I still love it. Yes, or a mic, which I couldn't figure out earlier. But I was like, I love the idea of photography and filming, but more so the art side of it, like
Yeah.
framing and like storytelling, but not the actual technical side. So I was like, oh, forget that. I also thought maybe I would do murals. I was like, how can
Oh,
I be somebody who's like goes out and paints like these huge murals? And Austin has a lot of murals.
yeah.
So I was like, maybe I could do something like that. Because like when you go to school for fine art, you are literally like sent out into the world like, now you're a fine artist. Go be a
Yeah.
fine artist. It's like, well, that's a lot of pressure because it's hard to be a fine
Of
artist.
course. Yeah.
It's really hard to like find your way in art because it's really competitive. Um, but yeah, so like basically, those were a couple things I was considering, but I was a little bit lost until I found cake, and then I was like, this is it. Because what I'm creating, people are into, they like it, and that makes me feel good. That makes me happy, and I can make whatever I want.
But it's also kind of really exciting when you are a pioneer. Like, when I did the Kim Jong Il book, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong Il, I'm like, okay, I had thought incorrectly that no one had done something like this before. There were two people who had,
Oh,
but it
I
was
didn't know
still
that.
like, okay, I'm writing someone else's autobiography, like in the first person. Like this is kind of even though it's in a very small way, groundbreaking. But that to me is so much more fun when it's like, okay, like I'm the kind of path breaker, figuring out as I go along.
Yes, exactly. And I actually, it's probably way better that you didn't know that the other ones existed because
Right.
then you were able to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Because that same with me, like I don't technically know that nobody had ever done these things that I had done, but they didn't tell me, nobody was telling me, so I just had to figure it out. So that means I can feel like, okay, I did this on my own. Also, I have to mention, um, Dave's favorite first line of a book is from that book, and I have it in my head. Right, it is. I remember the day I was born perfectly.
Yes, that's correct. I'm
It's
glad you
so
remember the
good.
line perfectly.
And because that was one of the things that my husband, I don't know if I mentioned that he was my husband, but Dave was like, he was reading your book and he was like, the title's obviously hilarious, but that first line is so good. It's like, this is like setting the pace for the book. But
I
anyway,
wish I could remember how I came up with that line. The other
yeah.
thing that is really cool about that, and I've never, I hate pointing out Easter eggs because I feel it's kind of spoils things. But the first line of the book starts with I, and the last word of the book is you. So it does go from I, Kim Jong Il, to you, the reader, the dear reader.
Ah,
So that's kind of a little. People probably have no one picked up on that before.
yeah, I like that. See, we try to do like Easter eggs in some of our stuff too, because it's
It's
like,
so fun, yeah, because then, like, people see it at face value, but then the people who do the work, it's just like, "Oh, this is just, like, something special just for me." Like, I
yeah.
love that when I watch a video or read a book or something like that. Wait, so tell me but how are you, like, paying the rent? I mean, were your parents like, what the hell are you doing with this art degree?" Like, it
Okay,
seems
yeah.
like a hard sell. Because there's so
Right,
much talk about, like, "Oh, getting an art degree is a waste of time and money. You're gonna be cleaning toilets. You're gonna be baking cakes for a living."
I felt I felt that way.
Natalie, before you answer that about getting out of school and finding a job, I want to talk to people who do have some disposable income. If you've been on the fence about buying gold and silver, have you seen what's going on around us? You've got the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. You've got the government trying to bail them out with our taxpayer money. Saudi Arabia is meeting with China to accept yuan for oil purchases. This might be the end of the petrodollar. And Xi Jinping, of course, is meeting with Putin in Russia. Behind the scenes, while we're not paying attention, MasterCard, Citigroup, and other global banking giants have started a digital dollar pilot, or what they call Biden bucks. Biden has fast tracked its development. What does that mean? The Fed can monitor every transaction and devalue purchasing power even more. Do you know where else they have digital money? China. China's digital currency helps the CCP punish or coerce citizens with social credit systems in place. If a citizen commits even a minor infraction, they can be blacklisted from traveling, going to restaurants, renting a home, or having insurance. You don't think it would happen here? Look what happened during the COVID mandates. Digital is currently a major step in expanding authoritarianism, and countries all over the world are poised to adopt central bank digital currencies, which are programmable forms of fiat money, which allow them to track, trace, and freeze a person's funds. The corporate press wants you to watch Biden give money away to Ukraine, and presidential hopefuls in the Republican Party are joining suit as they announce their bids for 2024. And according to Bloomberg, the world is in the midst of a macroeconomic reset. What's the shining star? Gold. Gold may be your best protection against all this. The Wall Street Journal has stated gold prices may be headed for record highs this year, and you're in luck. All you got to do is call the Proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late and mention my name. That's Michael Malice. You'll get best-in-class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA and qualifying rollovers. All you got to do, call 888-505-9845 to get a free investor guide today, or even easier, go to malicegold.com. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 6 years in a row. So call 888-505-9845 or just go to malicegold.com. Natalie, over to you.
Like, there definitely wasn't success for like a good while. Like, I was figuring things out. I didn't know what direction I was going. Honestly, my goal was to open up a bakery. It wasn't to start a YouTube channel and I was thinking more like locally and smaller scale. But as I made more cakes and they did well online, that was when it started to go that direction. But basically, like when I started, it was like I was dating Dave and we weren't married yet, but he was very much like, Natalie, go do this. He's like, you're really good at this. You're onto something. People like it. And he pushed me in that direction.
Good.
And so it was really, really one of the main reasons why I was able to like actually pursue the career of making cakes, because it sounds so crazy, right? Not a lot of people do it. So I was like, Dave was an awesome support. And one of the things, he had a job. So he was at the time we weren't working together.
You just said something that I think it's really important for the audience to hear, because there's two ways of looking at something, right? If you say not a lot of people are doing it, this is either a reason not to do it or it's an opportunity. And I think same thing with like being an author. Like my family just never understood, if you don't go into an office, how you're paying the rent. But if not a lot of people are doing something, that could be a really good thing, because there's less competition, as opposed to like it's not plausible.
Oh, totally. There's less competition, which is amazing. And also, I think what's important was like reading people's reactions.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you and I are entertaining, right? We're trying to put out content that people like. Well, that's true. You don't care.
I'm not. No, I meant I'm not entertaining.
Yes, you are.
This show is a bigger dumpster fire than Bridget's, and that's actually called Dumpster Fire.
Whatever. I watched this show before I met you, so that's not true. But anyway, the idea of like reading, like feeding off of the reaction from people, and I know you do that, and so you do like we all do to an extent. You can do things for yourself, or you can do things that are directly connected with what the people that you're entertaining. And I don't remember what were we talking about, because I had a point.
About not having competition and it's kind of being an innovator, and that's an opportunity.
Oh, I wanted to talk about how like the transition. So like basically I started making cakes instead of like fine art, and then Dave was there to help me out. So like basically like support system, like no matter who it is, like having friends around that are really supportive, and friends who are doing cool things that are able to, like, you're kind of able to feed off of that, is really, really great. Dave he was a director at a tech company, and he was just like moving up, doing really well. And so that was great, because I was able to like rely on him while I was trying to figure out like my way. Cause it was difficult, and I didn't know where to go. But like, as I started doing it more and more, I'm feeding off of what people are saying. One of the things that Dave said was, I would sit there and I would be working so hard, and I'm trying so hard to make these cakes. And I was like, I'm working just as hard as you, like not to be like, but I was working just as hard as Dave, only he's getting paid pretty well, like reasonably well. And I was making like nothing. And I was like, it's kind of hurts. Like, it sucks that I'm sitting here trying so hard, and I keep trying and trying. And, and then his reaction the one day was, he said, he goes, you know what, Natalie? He's like, just keep going. He's like, one day you're going to be the one making us money, and I'm going to be the one that's like, helping you out, which literally happened. We are a team, and we both make the content, and he's just as important as I am. But I just thought that was like, at the time, I remember being like, okay, like, all right, I'm going to keep going, even though I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. And then eventually down the road, we did take off more in it. And he was able to quit his job and then work with me, and now we work on everything together, which is great.
My favorite song that I've never heard it's by the Beach Boys. It's called "You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone." And one of my favorite bands, Saint Etienne, that's the name of they took that name for one of their compilations that have a poster signed. Bob from Saint Etienne wrote that on the poster when I asked him to, and I have it framed in my living room. And I think people, it might be hard for them to appreciate, especially if you're starting out trying to be a writer, artist, YouTube creator, whatever it is, how important it is to have that support system, and how the support system you have when you're young is actually often not a good support system, because your friends are useless and they're young idiots just like you. So when you're asking them for advice, they know what the hell they're talking about, and it's just going to be frustrating. But if you kind of seek out and cultivate these friendships with like creative people, it's really such a life preserver to keep you focused and sane. And because if you're just talking to normie at a party and you're like, I'm gonna go make like cake heads, they're not gonna have the capacity to be like, they're like, oh, okay, crazy lady. But if you're talking to someone who's like, makes boots, or is an author in my case, or whatever, it's like, okay, like you're doing your path, I'm doing my path. Like there's kind of this understanding and mutual support, which is so great. And it's one of the reasons I love being here in Austin, because there's so much of that here.
Yeah, and that was like, I'm so glad that we met for that reason, because like you're like that. It's nice to like kind of bounce ideas off of you, and like we can do a little back and forth, but like also I've met a lot of people through you that are in the similar industry, whether it's like YouTube or authors, or filmmakers. It's just like entertainment. It's very relatable. So to talk to people that are doing it too, no matter what level they're at too, they could be super successful or even like just starting out. The passion is exciting. Like everybody is so passionate and like ready to go and open-minded about things. So yeah, I really appreciate that too.
And the thing that's sick about New York culture, and I think corporate media culture, is that there's such this cynicism in any kind of passion or excitement. Like someone's supposed to sneer at it and be like, oh, okay, whatever. And one of the reasons I love your channel, and if you're bored, just sit down and just put it on, is because it's just you creating fun, positive, cool things. And you could just sit there for hours, and there's no sneering, there's no snarkiness. It's just a lady making beautiful, innovative cakes, and it's fun. And I mean, this is why I think I know this is like a lot of your audience are kids, and I think it's so healthy to have kids watching something wholesome but not boring. It's still innovative and creative, as opposed to some just garbage, Disney propaganda.
Right, exactly. Like there's no agenda, right? Like I really what I'm trying to do here is I am trying to get people excited to create. You don't have to want to make a cake, like you can want to just like make art, and like it's cool too, because like kids love it, and it's definitely like kid friendly, but also like adults are just as entertained. It's like, like when a family can sit down and both be entertained by
like Pixar.
The content. Exactly, Pixar. That's what I was thinking too. Like there's a few things here and there that are a little bit more adult, but never anything that wouldn't be appropriate for kids. So it's a lot of fun. I'm just trying to get everybody to like make stuff.
Wait, so tell me more about like what drove you guys to Austin, because you're not like me where I'm just on the bandwagon. Like 2011, 2012, Austin is a very different place. Like what drew you here?
So Dave and I are from Cleveland. So we were dating when we were in Cleveland, and Cleveland, when we started dating, it was 2008. So everything was just like, Cleveland's one of those cities that just doesn't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
So like when the economy went like to poop, it was like there were no jobs. It was really hard to do. It was definitely hard to do what you wanted to do, let alone like finding any job. And I was right out of college, just like trying so hard. And so Dave was in tech, so he was able to find a job, but I just wasn't. So basically we were like, you know what, we just got to go. We got to go somewhere. We got to move. Yeah. There's just no opportunity here. And Austin was we had a list. We were talking New York, we were talking here and there, but Austin, we just really liked that it was a little bit smaller, and a lot smaller than a lot of the other ones. And it's like the economy didn't really feel it. There was way more jobs. So I actually worked at in a doctor's office, like like an optometrist office in Cleveland. It was one of my many jobs that I had. I had so many because there was no full-time work. So one of the jobs was an optometrist assistant. So I did that I got a job doing the same thing in Austin, and I ended up making double what I was making in
Oh,
Cleveland.
wow.
And it's like, it was still like an hourly, but it was just like, wow, like this is obviously there's more going on here. So when we moved here, the other reason was it was super, I knew I wanted to do cakes too. So there was just like, it was just artistic, keep Austin weird. There was just like a lot of people who were willing to buy weird cakes. And all I wanted to do was make weird cakes. Like when I first started making my cakes, everybody was like, who would ever want to eat that? They were real like, yeah, I don't know about that. It looks like it looks like something it isn't. Like, it looks like a cow skull. Why would you want to eat that? And I was like, I don't know. Some people like it. And I did find people here in Austin who liked that. So I was getting cake orders here, and it really did help me like kind of grow. So that was the main reason why we moved here.
Well, so tell me the whole story about the wedding and those cakes, because that was really kind of fun.
Yeah. So my husband, Dave, he grew up watching horror movies. And so he was really into them. He watched them with his dad. It was just like an important part of his youth. And so I was really into making cakes that looked like people. So I was like, well, what if we bring these two things together for our wedding cake?
Wait, this
And I'm
was
like,
your idea? The heads were your idea?
yeah.
Oh,
So I was
okay.
like, I was kind of like, I'm not going to make a normal wedding cake. It's going to be in the
Right.
shape of something. I like realism. I'm really into the idea of people and busts. So I was like, what if I like put us in the movie? Like as if we were murdered and like it's this epic moment. So I actually made our two severed heads laying next to each other. And then it says, "Till death do us part." um, so that is out there. I had brown hair back then, but if you do look it up, severed head wedding cake, it'll pop up. And it's funny because that also, we were married just around Halloween. It was just before Halloween, so it was fitting. And also we were married at the Alamo Draft House, which was a movie theater that showed like these really cool, like 35 millimeter movies. Like it was awesome. It isn't there anymore, but it was a really great movie theater. So we got married in the movie theater during Halloween, horror themed cake. And the internet was like offended, but like not as offended as they'd be now. They were just like blown away. It was crazy. And that cake did really well. It was like all over in the media. And like you said, the media, that's funny. That was the first time that I really truly recognized that maybe not everything was accurate.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of these different news sites talking about the cake, and they would just say anything. Like some of them would call me and they'd get a couple quotes, and like it was like it was fine. But some of the big ones said things like, one of them said that my grandma passed out when she saw it. And I read that, and this was a legitimate news site. And I was like, my grandma did not pass out. There was no passing out whatsoever. My grandma was maybe a little bit like, whoa, this is crazy. But by no means did she pass out. She was perfectly fine. And
Not even a thing. Like, if they were literally decapitated heads, I think people would scream, they'd call the cops, they'd run. But I don't think people actually faint. That's like a 1940s
yeah,
movie
like,
trope.
oh, yeah,
No,
exactly.
you run. Like, if there's heads, you're running. You're not like, I'm just gonna like, just evolutionarily, right? You want to have the capacity, if there's death, to flee the scene as opposed to being the next
Oh,
prey.
yeah. Oh, totally. Like as if like, catch me. Like
Yeah.
it was so absurd. I remember her specifically being like, oh, but nothing like
Yeah,
no passing out. She didn't run or anything. But yeah, I was just so surprised by that. I was like, well, they just kind of made that up. I know it added to the story, and my grandma was there. There's a few things that were real, but yeah.
Folks, Michael Malice here, podcaster, author, and yes, underwear model. Sheath is something that I wear every day, and the great thing about Sheath underwear is that they have dual pouch technology for both parts of your anatomy. They also have a girls line. I don't wear that stuff. Dave Smith might. Go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice. You get 20% off. It's great underwear for when it's cold. It's great underwear for when it's hot. And I wear it every single day because it's the best underwear I've ever owned. The first time they brought into the studio, I was like, what is this? And now I swear by it. And in fact, I model for them. It's got added comfort, added performance, added mobility. And there's something a little subversive about talking to someone while the whole time your underwear is cupping your junk. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy that aspect of it. And folks, they're not just an underwear line. Sheath now has bamboo hoodies and shirts, which are really, really soft. So go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice. You get 20% off your order. Support the underwear that supports you and that supports the show. Folks, some of you might have some very bad habits, and Fume is a great way to stop those habits. It is a natural diffusive device that uses plants and behavioral science to help you trade out your negative habit for a positive one. And I think you know which one I'm talking about. It's not a vape. It's a non-electronic device designed to transform your negative habits. And instead of pods filled with potentially harmful chemicals like a vape, Fume uses cores infused with super plants like peppermint, cinnamon for delicious natural flavors. And it's got an adjustable airflow dial, magnetic end cap. Your fingers will always have something to do when you're trying to kick that really bad habit. The easiest way to stop bad habit is to switch to a positive one. I know it's hard to break. You know what I'm talking about. Fume can help. It's designed to perfectly do just that. It's Fume's goal to make switching easy and even enjoyable. They have thousands of 5-star reviews from people just like you who've successfully switched when other solutions just didn't work. You owe it to yourself to save money and worry about your capacity to breathe, among other things. Go to tryfume.com, use code Malice. You get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors and the new version 2 Fume to help kickstart your positive habits. That's tryfum.com. Use code Malice for 10% off your order today. Let's get back to the show. So I want you to give people advice on how you as a creator, like on the internet, because you're obviously competing with a lot of other people. There's a lot of other really amazing, extremely creative people, both in kind of your wheelhouse and outside of it. I've sent you a couple of these like amazing cakes from Japan where like they're making like a koi pond, and it's just absolutely crazy because they're using like gelatin to make the water, and they have all these layers, and it's actually really funny because it's this Japanese video of this girl making this koi pond, and it's like this beautiful serene scene, and like the water's still, and there's the fish, there's the seaweed, there's the rocks, but the caption, she's like, this almost killed me. It like took 80 hours. I had to make this effing cake. I'm never doing this again. But it's just
I
like,
feel her on that.
yeah, if you just watch the video, it just seems like, oh, this is so fun. And meanwhile, the creator's like, why did I do this? But I'm already
Oh,
40 hours
totally.
in, I can't abort it now.
It's funny because people say that to me too. They're like, you make it look so easy. And I'm like, yeah. Sometimes it's like, this isn't working because there's no class that she took to figure out how to do this. There's no, like, she was doing it on her own. She's figuring it out. And it's like, you mess up a lot. But yeah, like that kind of stuff, like the idea of like, that's what's so great about it. It's like food art specifically is like not that old. Like we had flowers, buttercream flowers, even that was like, probably like well, I don't even know. I don't know when buttercream flowers started, but it was less than 100 years ago.
You don't know when buttercream flowers started?
That's not art. That's not art. People don't think that's art. No, I know I should know the history of cake. It's actually I've tried to look it up, but it's a little, everybody's like, they make up years. Nothing is truly true. But anyway, you have these buttercream flowers and stuff. But it wasn't like really, really artistic until I'd probably say like 70s, 80s. People started to get a little bit more into the idea of like sculpted cakes. And then like, it's just like a little bit at a time.
Well,
But
also like that's when Nouvelle Cuisine happened in restaurants, where the whole point of the meal was what the food looked like as opposed to the quality of the dish, and that was
that's a
very
great
much made
point.
fun of in the 80s. Yeah, so it probably spilled over to the desserts.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, because it's like the classy thing. Is it, for like a cake? Is my birthday classy? And then it sort of said like, forget classy. Let's do like impressive and exciting.
Yeah.
So you were starting to see things like shoe cakes and purse cakes and stuff. Now the hyperrealism didn't come until later. I hadn't seen when I started, it wasn't really a thing. There was realistic cakes, but there's a difference between a realistic cake where you're looking at it and you're like, that looks like a dog.
Yeah.
And you actually thinking it's a dog. Like
Yeah.
if it looks like a dog, it's realistic. If it's hyper realistic, you think it's that object. Like, so if I make an apple cake and you're like, that's an apple, hyper realistic. And
Yeah, it's like the
so,
difference between a mannequin and an android, right? Because a mannequin looks like a person, but you're not gonna think it's a person, but an android
right,
actually looks like a person,
right. You're like sitting there
like
like,
Lex.
this is a, yeah, exactly. So like that's what I always found the most interesting. I was like, how can I like keep being innovative? And that's what's so exciting about like cake art to me is like there was so much potential and there still is. Because not a ton of people are doing it. It's still kind of new, the idea of making it so real you're tricking people. But that has been my goal since the beginning. All I wanted to do was make hyper realistic cakes. Like I said, like the artist that I liked in college, like Ron Mueck, I was like, I want to make cake versions of this, where you can literally look at his work and you're like, how are these not real people? So I was trying to do like my take on that, and
I gotta
it's
ask, did
worked.
you ever reach out to maybe you haven't even thought of this, have you ever tried to reach out to either of those artists?
No, I know that they're pretty big, so I wonder if there's a way I could reach out to them because I've
Well,
actually
so
never
Keith
even thought of
Urban.
it. Yeah, yeah, it's true. I wonder, I don't know what they're up to now because it's been a minute since I
Hold
should
on.
try to see. I'll see if they'll reach out or if they're
Listen, there's
gonna.
no way Ron Mueck is, like, such a big name that he's only 64 that
He's
you
a
can't get
big
a hold of
deal.
him. What's that?
Yeah, maybe. I know he's a big deal. Like he's a fine artist. Like he's a
I
I don't know.
I
I could still try though.
I'm not saying he's not a big deal, I'm just saying you'd be surprised how here's his Instagram, he's only got 81,000 followers, I'm using only very loosely. Point
Yeah,
being, like, if you DM'd him, his DMs are open.
that's true. I should.
So if you just message him, you're like, "You've been a big inspiration." Listen, I've been around this enough, and so have you, that now we're at the point in our careers where people tell us we're inspirations, and every time you hear that, it's even at his level, I'm sure, because it's not like you're making some stupidity, and even if you were, it's still moving to
Mhm,
be like, "Okay, I kinda have these kids that I've helped along."
mhm. No, you're right. I really should go. I should reach out to him. I actually never really considered it because I was always like, he's like this, you know. But yeah, why
No,
wouldn't I?
his stuff is great, holy crap, like,
Isn't
his
it cool?
Instagram.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I know this guy. Oh, yeah. So here's the thing. I'll give you one example. Someone made, I can't tell if it's a painting or a sculpture of what the Simpsons would look like if they were human beings. And it's just
I love that
absolutely
stuff.
horrific. It's just absolutely
Yeah.
horrific. But the guy sent it to Ron and Ron put it on his Instagram.
Did he?
Yes.
All right, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Right after this, after we're done
No, but
talking, I'm gonna get
seriously,
on
like
there. And I
that's such a
am.
full circle touching thing. And,
Yeah.
so anyway, so I want to hear though your advice, what you would have for people who are like, especially young creatives who are trying to get their work out there and have it go wide in, YouTube or Instagram or these other places, because talent alone is not going to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. Because there's so many talented people.
Right.
At one point I was talented and nobody cared, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think about that and I'm just like, really what it is the thing that worked best for me was I was a little bit insecure, like you get insecure about your art because you're creating, you're doing something that is like, I'm putting myself out there. You just have to not care at all. Like just keep going and working. And when people say something negative, who cares? Like people even say I put cakes on the internet that look like things, and I still get people who are like, and they're kind of nasty. And it's like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't know if that comes with age or what, but like if you just stop caring about that and you just keep like feeding off the positivity, like that's what I've been doing. Like also, like we said earlier, support system, having people around you who are also creating makes you feel like it's possible, like it's real, like you're doing it, I can do it. This is all very possible. Like that's what works for me the best, for sure.
But how are you actually getting like eyeballs? Like that's the kind of thing, like breaking out.
Eyeballs, eyeballs is experimenting, like basically when I first started, there were times where I knew something would go viral and like that I was creating. It sounds crazy, but I would just be like, I know that this is cool because it was completely brand new. So I had never seen it done before. And if I looked it up, nobody had seen it. So I experimented a lot to try to get to that place. So finally, when I would have something where I was like, this is it, um, the innovation and that was like, it's this brand new thing that people haven't seen. But you can continue to do that. Like, I still make hyper realistic cakes and people still like them, but I am constantly trying new things. I'm not always making like an apple and orange, a pear, like instead I go, all right, I just made an axolotl. I had a lot of requests for that, the little pink guys. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be really hard. There's a lot of things about this that doesn't really translate into cake, but I'm going to try my best and I'm going to find like these solutions. So I find if you like keep trying and keep innovating, that's a really great way to put out like work that you gain a following. And then also consistency.
Hold on. We'll get to the eyeballs again in a second. Axolotls, for people who don't know, are neotenous amphibians who are now either extinct or critically endangered because they live in a lake by Mexico City. They're not actually pink. But that's a form that's very common in captivity. And it's not. But the thing that's interesting about them is the pink form. Their tails are translucent. So how are you going to replicate a translucent effect in cake?
Did you watch my most recent YouTube video?
No, I have
literally addressed this. That's so funny.
Good.
No, you're going to have to watch it. I'm not answering.
Because
no, I'm just kidding. Okay. So I was like, this little guy is translucent.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like I go over all like the idea of translucency and how you would create that effect. Basically, the only way that I could make that work was I used wafer paper. Wafer paper is edible paper, and it has a very subtle, like translucent effect. Like if you put it up to light is going to shine through. So I knew that I could use wafer paper for the tail, but the actual axolotl itself is also translucent. So I was like how do I create that effect? I did it through actually layering color. So when I go to paint the chocolate is very opaque. No light is going through it. It's just like a solid sculpture. So what I did was I just layer. So that's how you actually would do it if it was a painting. That's how you create that effect in paintings. So I was like, I'm just going to go in and I start with light colors and then I add some darker colors. And as you start to add colors, like I even throw in a little bit of blue. And even though the whole thing is pink, you put in a little blue and then you put layers of pink over it. And it creates like almost like you can see its organs through that, like through those layers. So it's just really like painting techniques, which is great because that was what I had studied prior to cakes. So I'm very comfortable with painting. So I get excited when I get to do like fun painting stuff.
So that's the kind of thing they taught you in art school, like how to like create translucency and all these other sorts of things.
Yeah. That is one of the things that they taught. It's funny because when I was in art school, I think that it was necessary because I did learn a lot and they were really pushing me to, like everybody, to experiment and find their way and research other artists and get inspired by them. Now what's cool is that like we have like, everything online. So like I wish I had that back then, but so now you have channels like mine where you can watch somebody make these like crazy cakes, tons of them, hundreds of them, and you can kind of feed off of that too. So I feel like right now it's just like really exciting for like artists in general. So
one of the things that you and I have discussed, but I still want to hear your thoughts on the show. One of the reasons I'm an author is like when I die, I'm going to have a shelf of books that I created and they're going to be here in perpetuity. Who knows? They're probably going to be out of print the second I croak. But the point being, like, I've created something that's long lasting. This is one of the reasons, like, I don't want to have a column or things like that because they're much more ephemeral, right? Like you write a column about like whatever's happening today, in a month, no one's reading it unless you have a collection of columns. But even then, that's creating a book. Like, what's your perspective on, making something, and every one of your videos, spoiler alert, you're cutting the cake and it's done. Like, so all this work, it reminds me of, there was this, I forgot the term. Was it a mandala? There's this, I think, Buddhist technique where they make these insane, this was on House of Cards. They get a table, like a huge table, and they make this insane art out of colored sand. And it's this beautiful, intricate, symmetrical thing. And then they just wipe it away. And the whole point is about like the impermanence of life and so on and so forth. And you look at it and you're like, I want to kill myself. Like, do not do that. So like, how do you grapple with that as an artist? Because that's something that drives me crazy. It's actually always been like one of my favorite things about working with cake is the fact that it's temporary. And there are a lot of artists out there that kind of like play on that. Like that example is perfect. So basically, like,
my thing has always been, I love the idea that I'm creating something like at the end of the basically I'm taking sugar and flour and butter and like these ingredients like and I just put them together and then I create these insane sculptures. And then people literally eat them. So it's just this like really fast-paced, like quick. I'm constantly putting out work, which I like. I know sometimes when you work on art, you can spend like months or even
Oh yeah.
years, and it's like I like that, but I really like the idea of being able to like churn out work. So the idea that it's gone in a couple days is exciting for me. So I actually don't hate it. People are always like, you put all that effort in and then people eat it. And I'm like, I know, but it's fun. And I have it documented. But the process of, the senses too. So like you have the process, you're using all your senses. Like when I present a cake, people, it's different than when it's online, like you get to smell it and you can touch it and you're eating it. Like every sense is being used. And I just love the idea that it's like this super entertaining type of art. It's not just visual, like it really, you're able to like go through all these different like phases with
Well,
the
it's like
artwork.
it's an experience.
Mhm.
Because if it's just like
Exactly.
a cake or just like a painting, those are very different, because you're dealing with something 3D and then your brain is like tricking itself. So that's kind of a fun aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and I also love a lot of times I like to put art. I haven't been able to do a ton of it, but the idea of putting art in like installation almost.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like an art, like in a museum or anything like that, like or at an art show. But like I made a cake for somebody in San Antonio. He was a hunter, and he had this room of like all these animals, and it's all the like deer heads. It was huge, like super tall walls, all filled with like, I think it was like probably 5 rows of deer heads, like all the way across. It was insane. So for his birthday, I actually, we took one of the deer heads down and I put up a cake of the deer head. And I actually went up there and I got on a ladder and I'm like color matching the cake to the actual deer heads once I was there to make sure that everything was legit and it looked good. And they had the party. Nobody knew that it was a
Oh.
cake. They all believed that this is a long time ago too. They all believed that this was an actual deer head. And it was just like a success. It was super fun. And like, I love that cake. I love the idea of putting it, like putting it in a space. And I kind of like to trick people. Like I like to have fun. Like I'm kind of like pranking them.
Yo, what's up, guys? This is NBA champion Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Bobby Portis in the Bucks. Inside, Portis for the slam.
Here with my brand new podcast, Keep It a Buck. Each week, me, AB, and Barrette.
It's your boy Blessed Up AB, man.
They call me Baby Tay, they call me Red Tay, they call me Barrette.
We'll be talking to special guests from fellow athletes, celebrities, and friends from all walks of life. And we'll keep it a buck. So you saying you better than J. Cole?
J.
I
Cole.
will cook J. Cole.
J. Cole, nice though.
My floater is Hall
Not
of
knocking
Fame.
your game.
They got to watch it guys like Chris Middleton and Giannis, like watching these guys like 300 makes a day.
Not, and I'm not talking about just shots.
Makes.
It just ain't gonna come just because you dreaming about it. You gotta actually make it into a reality. You gotta speak it into existence. You gotta make your daily deposits every day.
Ooh, lunch meat.
Lunch meat.
Download new episodes of Keep It a Buck every Thursday, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Keep it a buck. Peace.
When I watched your show Texas Cake House, it was just really kind of silly where they would have these contrived drama. And one of the big ones was like, you got to drive to the place and the road's bumpy and it's like, oh no, or is the cake going to collapse? And let me assure the people watching this that when we drove to Rogan's show with the Lex cake in the car, like my nerves were at 11 because I was just absolutely convinced with every bump that the robot was just going to kind of collapse. And so that drama was kind of real. But you also did a lot of time on the show Buddy versus Duff, which is on Food Network. You have 2 chefs competing to make these big kind of cake spectacles. Like the thing that just seems crazy about that show, which is obviously the point, is you have these insane time constraints to bust out something that is just kind of monumental. Like, how do you handle like dealing, and you're being filmed the whole time, of course. Like, how do you handle just having to be an artist under pressure, which just seems so counterintuitive to what being an artist is about?
Oh, yeah, right? It is. I think that I actually like love the idea of the pressure and the challenge because I'm like the kind of person who would like kind of like put it off. Like I wouldn't like push myself. Like I love that I can sit there and they're like, you have this amount of time. It needs to be amazing. And I just sit there and I go, all right, let's go. And I just like, it's cool because basically on that show, we have a team. So there's a Cake Boss's team and then the Ace of Cakes. And so like we're going against each other. And the competition is like super legitimate. Like the other team is really, really talented. And our team is really talented. So we're sitting there like, it's real, like we're sitting there like, I want to be better than them. Like we got to try really hard. So like, I just love it. I love that I can like be pushed to do these things. And sometimes I have to like let things go. Like, I'm like, this isn't as perfect as I wanted it. And I just have to let it go and move on. And it's nice to be pushed to do that too. Because I would spend, like I said, like months on cakes if I could, but you only have a couple days. So I thrive in that environment. I really, really like it. I know that not everybody would. But
how are you not like collapsing? What are you drinking? Monster coffee? Like, what's your fuel?
Oh yeah, those shows are like so stressful.
Right.
Like you're working like 12-hour days, and like maybe get like one day off a week or whatever. And it's not like 12 hours of me just being like, I'm sculpting. It's like these cakes are like 10 feet tall, So not only do you get to do the fun sculpting faces and stuff, you have to literally build the cake up. So it's like a whole team of us. Like, I've got 5-pound buckets of modeling chocolate. Actually, they're 10-pound buckets of modeling chocolate. And you're put them in the microwave all hasty and you're trying to knead it. And like, you're just picking up like mounds of chocolate and throwing it on a sculpture and trying your hardest to make sure that nothing goes wrong. It doesn't fall over because cake is so sensitive. It's like a whole thing. It's exhausting, but it's also like at the same time, really, really rewarding and fun. Like in the moment I sit there and I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like I'll like with my friends on our team, we're just like, this is really rough. And then at the end of it, once it's all over, we look back and we're like, that was fun though. I'm okay with it.
What was the one that you would say with all the ones you did that you missed the mark the most? Because I'm sure the time constraints are crazy. You know what I mean? If you guys had time, you could make anything perfect, but
miss the mark. I don't miss the mark. Usually find a way. Let me think of something. I don't know that I have one that I was like that I look back and I'm like,
There had to be where like you had to give up on a design idea or concept because it's like, okay, we're not gonna be able to pull this off, even though it would have been amazing if we could.
Okay, I do have one. We made on one of the episodes, we made see, I love the cake though, so it's a little bit sad for me to like talk, but we made this Star Wars cake. It was when Galaxy's Edge was opening in it was in Disneyland, not World. In Disneyland, Galaxy's Edge is opening, so we're making this Star Wars themed cake. And I made Yoda, and I did that in like about a day, and I loved it. It was a life-size Yoda. I did all the measurements. It looked awesome. The only thing that I was bummed about was that like I really wanted to, it was supposed to be when it was in this like this scene, it's a Dagobah swamp. I don't know a ton about Star Wars, but that's
it. You're right.
Okay, so Yoda like raises his arm. The cake literally did that. And then the X-Wing comes up. And the only thing that we were bummed about, even though this cake was amazing, was the fact that we didn't get to really get into like this jungle like scene because it didn't feel as jungly as it needed to. Because that's the whole idea. It's existing in this space where it's like trees and hanging, pieces. So we really wanted to push that and we just couldn't fit it in. So the cake was still amazing and I still love it. It's one of my favorites, but there's just no time. Like I had to pick. I was like, I want Yoda. Yoda's more important. So you had to make that call. Yoda needs to look like perfect. And then so that meant other areas were lacking.
How did you get him to raise his arm?
So that was not my job. Good thing, because the technical stuff, like when they start to make things move, that's not my job. I'm more of the sculptor on the team and painter. But what they did was it was Duff and Jeff. They basically built this like, there's like a contraption. I don't know words, like an air pump thing, almost like a bike air pump thing. Anyway, they put air into this tube. And when the air went in, the arm would go up. That's the gist of it. I wish that I knew how to explain it better, but it was really amazing.
And there must have been a hinge built in too for the shoulder joint.
So what I had to do was find a way to build the cake around this so that it lines up perfectly. It was like a piece of wood, right? That would be the arm. So like as the air goes in, it lifts. I had to find a way to like make sure that the arm fit with the body. So that was really hard too. But I figured it out because I'm really good at like understanding like space. So like I understood where the shoulder and the neck needed to be compared to the arm, and it was like a whole thing. It was pretty cool though.
One of the frustrating things about your channel is the view counts are very counterintuitive. And I'm thinking specifically like early on, you did a beholder cake from Dungeons and Dragons. And for those who don't know, the beholder is like an orb with one giant central eye, a mouthful of many rows of teeth, and then 8 different eyes on stalks, which each have different like magical capacities. So you'll put that one up, and then you'll make a cake of like a sandwich in a plastic bag, because the plastic bag effect is very cool, no question. But like the sandwich gets like 50 times the views as the beholder. I'm like, guys, she made a floating fantasy creature. You could see a sandwich wherever the fuck you want. Just go outside. It really does it not frustrate you how like there seems to be such a disconnect between like the innovation and the creativity and what goes wide and what doesn't?
Um, I mean, like frustrating, sorta, but like I kind of get it, and I only get it because I've made so many cakes. I understand. It's like it's basically with my cakes. A lot of the time, people get excited about the idea that they're looking at something that's very familiar.
Okay. Oh,
So they're
okay. That
like,
makes
"This
sense.
is something that I see every day. It's a toothbrush." And so it's like, this is a toothbrush that, oh, no, it's not. And then they have this moment where they're like, oh, and they get tricked. The beholder, you're not getting tricked, right? Because it's like a
Right.
character. So I do love making both, but I do get why I see both sides. Some people love the more like character focused cakes. And then some people like that, like, all I want to do is be tricked. Like,
The
can you
thing
do it?
The thing that you do that's also really cool, and I want you to speak to this from like an artistic perspective. Like when you are, I think what adds to the realism is all the imperfections and like the little bumps and whatever. I'm thinking specifically when you did a hairbrush, you also had strands of hair caught in it because that absolutely adds to the realism that this looks like a brush. Because when we look at a brush, we're not seeing some platonic idealistic version of a brush unless it's in the package. You're seeing something that's been used, and so is that something that is kind of taught as part of this kind of realistic art theory? Is it's to kind of take it away from this kind of pure vision?
I don't know that I was taught that, but I noticed it. I think it was more so like I realized it and recognized it because I will say like one of the main things, like one of the very very early things that you're taught when in an art class, and I'm talking like grade school, when you're drawing like a still life, for example, the teacher, a common saying is draw what you see, not what you know.
Okay.
So it was always like, I'm literally doing that because I'm taking it and I'm looking at a real apple with all of its little imperfections. And I say, I'm going to replicate this in cake. I'm replicating what I see, not what I think it looks like. And that is like a really, really important part of why it would look realistic. Like if I'm making a banana, it needs to be bruised. It has to have little green parts. Like, and that's really like, it's funny because it's just like one little mark will like completely change the vibe of it. It will look so much more realistic if I add those things. So yeah, it's really important. I don't know that I was taught that necessarily, but I do tell people that. Like when people want to make realistic cakes or art in general, I'm always like, include that stuff. I know you want it to be this perfect, unless it makes sense for what you're making. You think, oh, this is the perfect apple. It's like, no, make it a little lopsided.
Yeah, when I was doing Dear Reader, one of the more frequent comments I get is that, why aren't there footnotes? I would love to have references for all these things because everything in the book I pulled somewhere from either North Korean propaganda or from Western sources. And I'm just like, an autobiography doesn't have references. That's not how it works. Like I have to commit to the form. And the other comment, people like, how do I know what part of this is real and what isn't? And I'm just like any other autobiography. Like if you're
Mhm.
reading, Donald Trump's autobiography, Hillary Clinton, you have to sit there and be like, okay, this is a person with their perspective and they're going to have an agenda and you have to keep that in mind. So to kind of be like, this isn't a history, this is one person's perspective, and kind of you have to kind of stick to the form to make something organically creative. So obviously that's something that you do as well, and that pays off a lot. I want to here's something else that you and I have talked about, but I want to hear you address. Like the fact that so much of your audience is kids and you get these messages from these kids, that's got to be like, it's just like the best thing ever. I was just hanging out with my nephew last week when I was in Miami. I did get him to cry 3 times in the afternoon, 2 of which were
What'd you
unintentional.
do?
Well, it started with I picked him from school and he was so excited. And then I
Oh.
said to him, he's in kindergarten. I go, oh, do you know what a car accident is? And he said, no. So I couldn't say my line, which is, mommy's been in a car accident. Come with me, which is actually a great line to tell the children. It really gets them into your van. But I did tell him he's going to come live with me. And he just started crying. He's like, I want my mom, even though she was like 100 feet away. So that was number one.
I'm over here thinking he's excited to see you. Why would you say that to him?
He
Poor
was
boy.
excited. And that's why he should, like, we're coming to live with me. But, you know, who needs him anyway? Little
It's like,
crybaby.
where's my mother?
Yeah, I want mom. No, he didn't even say, I want mom. I want mom. You know, I brought him to her and it was fine. Listen, my house is better than her house, to be honest. Let's be honest. But
That's funny that real quick, but when I was really young, I was very much, my mom stayed home, so I was with her all the time. And when she would go to the store, if she was gone really long, I'd be like, Dad, where's mom? I was very young. And he'd go, she's gone. And I would go, well, where'd she go? She's gone. And he would whisper it. And I would be like, where is she? And he messed with me. Like, I love him. He was an absolutely fantastic dad. But like, he used to mess with me and I hate it. I was like, oh, where's my mother?
wait,
That reminded me
the
of
fact
that.
is that it would work every time.
Oh yeah. Like, cause I was a child. And also back then I was, my parents raised me to be very, obedient. I trusted them. I was very like, everything you say is correct. To the point where I believed that my mother was gone. And
my grandma used to do this little trick where she would just close her eyes and pretend she was dead. It's a real good movement.
Get out.
Oh yeah.
That reminds me of
let
Dave's
me tell you,
grandma.
it worked every time. It worked every time. I hadn't thought about that.
Messing with kids is so funny and cute and also mean.
Yeah. But I want to hear, like, talk a little bit about that, because I mean that's got to be one of the most rewarding parts of your output.
For sure. Like I have a lot of times parents will reach out and they're like, like, would you mind, sending a message, or like even some in Texas I'm able to actually meet up with, which is really cool.
Oh,
We just did not that long ago. We were actually able to make her a cake, which was crazy because it usually doesn't work out. It's really difficult. But we made her a cake. It was for her birthday. And I think I want to say she was like 12. But it was so sweet to meet her. She was just like, her mom goes, she did her hair. She's got her hair done. She's ready to go. It was the cutest thing. It's like, just her so excited, and she was asking me questions, and like anytime I have an opportunity to like meet with kids, I do it. It's super rewarding. It's one of my favorite things about being able to be on like YouTube and like have an audience on YouTube. It's like I love when the kids get excited. Like it's the best.
I was friends with Kirsten Haglund, who was Miss America. She moved out of the United States. I had her on my show. I met her when I was doing Red Eye. And for her, like I talked, like you're like a superhero. Like for a little kid to meet Miss America, like they will remember for the rest of their lives. And she didn't take it too seriously, like that she's Miss America, like it's an accomplishment, but it wasn't like she didn't have an attitude at all. But like that aspect of like that little kid it's like the opposite of being traumatized. It's like it's traumatized in a positive way. They're seeing the girl from the TV like appear, and it's just like, holy crap, magic's real. Like I'm never gonna give up on my dreams. It's
totally.
Yeah.
Like, and I always like I do that. I would ask, like, I'm like, what are you into? Do you like to make art? A lot of them do like to make art, or they like to do makeup, or what, like, which is an art as well, depending on what you're doing. Like, and yeah, it's just like I'm so excited that they're excited. Because like I remember when I was younger, I like everybody would say this, but I wish I had like somebody who was like, go out there and do the thing. Like you can do it. And I didn't necessarily have like a person who told me that. I had a lot of support, but not like, somebody who was creating and succeeding come up to me and tell me that. So I just like, I hope that I'm like, okay, I hope that they go on and they remember and they at least like, it doesn't have to be cake. Just get out there and
But
do
it's
stuff.
also crazy that we're such dinosaurs that thanks to like the internet, like these kids who are coming up, they're like 10 or 15, the things they could do with makeup or these other things, like
That's
holy
what
crap.
I'm saying.
You don't have to
Right.
be
I
nice. It's
didn't
like,
start
Jesus.
until like way later. I'm like, I talked to like 10-year-olds who are like baking cakes that look legit. They're like, I made the mac and cheese cake from one of your videos. And they show me it. And I'm just like, I'm proud. Like, I'm like, I'm gonna tear up. Like, I was like, Jules, oh my goodness, I'm so excited that you made this. And then, and then they just like start getting into it. Next thing you know, they're sending more cakes. And it's like, and the parents are really encouraging, which is really cool. Like, I feel like now more than ever, parents aren't like, hey, do this. And, they seem to be a little bit more open, like YouTube, I guess, or is showing that you can be creative and the arts and everything like that. Like you can actually do it. So they're really encouraging their kids to do stuff. At least that's what I'm seeing. And it's awesome.
I'm just imagining you with with the mac and cheese cake and trying it and being like, are you trying to make an ass out of me? Like just throwing it against the wall. Like you're trying to upstage me. I'm Natalie Sideserf. I've been on American Idol.
You're half my age. I can't believe this.
Yeah, drop it. Make it again.
I know. I should. Could you imagine if I was a jerk like that?
I can't because I know you very
Childish.
well and you're like actually really, really nice. And it's really kind of fun hanging out because like nothing gets to you, but like you'll make these faces because it's like you're such a genuinely sweet and kind person. You're so American. And as an immigrant, like
I am
being friends with
Midwest,
someone who's
right?
like a real American. It's just so fun.
Like I like when I like darker humor and I think things are funny like that, but like it's not natural for me
No.
to be
yeah.
like mean or like, it just doesn't feel right. So I'm just like, I just am a positive person. I've always been.
Natalie, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I would say just like talking to you about art. Anytime I get to do that, I have fun. So it was cool to talk about art with you.
You are welcome.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.